Okay. So... Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky. Welcome to my studio. Today we are looking at an important event in Canadian history. Today is the 59th anniversary of the launch of Alouette 1, or Alouette 1, which was the first Canadian satellite launched into outer space. And this is the painting that we are going to recreate. So this is really one of the first, I think this is the first painting we've made depicting something in outer space. We're going to be doing a few more of these over the next few months, but this is a great place for us to start because this is a significant milestone in Canadian history, and people may or may not know the significance of this satellite, and we're going to get into it here because it marks really one of the, not just Canadian history, but a massive engineering feat for all of humankind. So we're going to make this painting start making in a few moments here. I'll let you know that there's an outline which you can download. It looks like this, and I'll show you where to find it. So you can, and I'll show you how to transfer that outline. Right before I do that, I'll just let you know that there's a private Facebook group just for people like yourself that are watching. This is a great place for you to, it's a great community of like-minded artists, and I strongly encourage, if you're watching me right now, you probably already are a member of it, but since most people who will eventually watch these videos are not, please consider strongly joining it. It's people post paintings that they've been working on here. Here's Dolores doing some plein air painting outside. These look gorgeous, Dolores. Wow, that's awesome. I'll also mention that there was people have been asking me for a while now, almost a year, since we painted the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. And here's what the Mona Lisa looks like today. But this is what many people believe it looked like when it was originally finished way back in 1500. We're not exactly sure, 1506, 1513, somewhere around that period of time. So I finally went and made a version of it and put it in the Dropbox folder where the Mona Lisa is. In fact, let's take a quick second here. Oh, they're both interesting. If you go to, there's a folder just for our paint master study class in the description below, and you can go find that. But today we're going to be painting Alouette 1. So while there are 80 episodes we've already done of the master study, we're on episode 17 here of the Paint the News. You click on here, you're going to see 3 files. You're going to see 2 versions of the outline. One's JPEG and PDF, and one is the outline, obviously, of course. So we'll get to that in just one second. What I did want to also acknowledge is today is not only an important day in the history of Canada as far as space exploration, but it's also Canada's first day of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And it's now a federal holiday, so all government buildings are closed for the day. Many banks and other institutions are also closed. The school I teach at, Emily Carr University here in Vancouver, is also closed to show respect for this holiday, which marks a really incredibly sad chapter in not only Canadian history, but I think global history, because the way that Indigenous people were treated and have been treated and are still treated throughout the world is an absolute tragedy, a shame, and hopefully days like this where people are taking a moment to reflect on reconciliation and understanding the truth of what has happened to generations of Indigenous people, again, around the world. This is not just a Canadian thing, because I know some people are watching from around the world and they're saying, oh, well, thank goodness that didn't happen here. Well, chances are it did happen where you are, because there have been First Nations all over the world. Just so actually a couple of links I just want to show here. So this is the Canadian government's website here, otherwise known as Orange Shirt Day. I don't have an orange shirt. I know that you can buy an orange shirt in many places, and it goes towards reconciliation causes. So if you are interested and want to support a great cause, Reconciliation Canada is one site. Another one that I think is fantastic is Outward Bound Canada, which supports programs for Indigenous youth. And the Indigenous youth generally feel the brunt of the trauma that was created through programs like residential schools that scooped children up and forcibly removed them from their families, took them far away. Many of them never saw their parents ever again, and these children went to schools, and the vast majority of their experiences were extremely negative. The laundry list of things that happened to people in those institutions is horrific and shameful. And as a father myself, I often think what would I do if my daughter was taken away and I never saw her again, and I might have heard things, because often these children were taken away to these buildings, and if they tried to write letters to their family to tell them about what they were experiencing, those letters were censored, and so their parents never knew what was happening. They probably suspected, because some of that had also happened to them in previous generations. But those children who tried to communicate to the outside world of what happened, they were also they were beaten, raped, murdered in many instances. And so it's taken years for the truth to come out about some of these incredible, horrific tragedies that happen to people. If you are, I want to share, I'm not going to read some of this, but this is an excellent book, All Our Relations. I just finished this yesterday by Tanya Talaga. Awesome book. It was recommended to me by a mentor of mine who also happens to be Indigenous, and I saw him post about this on Facebook, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. So I got it from the library. You can get it from your local library. I'm sure anywhere in Canada this is available, and obviously you can order it from your local bookstore or off of Amazon, Goodreads, etc. Really what this talks about is it's a thoroughly researched document that talks about first-person experiences of residential schools, and again, not just things that happen to Indigenous people in Canada, but in Australia, New Zealand, which many people think of New Zealand as the sort of the ideal of settler and Indigenous relationships, and yet many things have also happened, and actually some people say it's getting worse throughout Europe, the Scandinavian countries. I mean, anyway, we could go on. I strongly recommend this. One of the things that I just thought was just this beautiful quote right at the beginning here. It's, "But don't say in the years to come that you would have lived your life differently if only you had heard this story. You've heard it now." And that sends such a chill down my spine, because I think it's true. Once you understand the truth of what happened to Indigenous peoples here in Canada and around the world, you can't look away anymore. You can't pretend you don't know. And I know many people, for that reason, deliberately go out of their way to avoid learning the truth of what happened to people, because the truth is so horrible and so horrific. But in order for us to move on and to have true reconciliation, you need to understand what happened to these people, and to develop empathy for their struggle. And some people also say, well, you know, how does this really affect me? This situation, the tragedy, the genocide that happened to Indigenous people in Canada and again around the world, the United States, arguably even worse. The fact that there is still a large segment of the North American population that is essentially a second class affects us all, especially other people of color who, you know, if it's okay to treat this group of people as a less than, maybe even less than human, then it's also a slippery slope that allows other people to also be treated in that way. And I want my daughter to grow up in a world where this is just some crazy episode of the human story that is impossible to believe, rather than something that continues through more and more generations. So I'm sorry to begin on a little bit of a down note, but it's when we're about to launch into talking about this incredible achievement that Canada did, I think it's also worth just taking a moment to reflect that there are some very dark episodes in Canadian history that should also be acknowledged, especially on this day of truth and reconciliation. Okay. So let's move on, and let's take a look at a little bit of the history of Alouette 1. So Alouette 1, as I said, was a Canadian satellite launched into space on September 29th, 1962, and it marks makes Canada the third country to have launched a satellite into space. Now, it was actually launched aboard an American rocket, so technically Canada didn't launch it, but Canada was the third country to have a satellite go into space. I have read other places that said the United Kingdom, in fact, also on a Canadian government site, says the United Kingdom was the third, making Canada the fourth, so I can't quite, anyway, but almost everywhere else I've seen says Canada was the third. So the purpose of the Alouette spacecraft, could you call it a spacecraft? Yes. Was to measure the ionosphere, and the ionosphere is, you know, just another what would you call it? I'm not a scientist, but sort of a belt of like a barrier between us here on Earth and outer space, and the beyond whatever else, like what it's actually made of. The reason why the satellite was sent up there to study the ionosphere is because radio waves bounce off the ionosphere, and the how humans use the ionosphere is it allows us to communicate with people, robots or whatever that are on the other side of the Earth potentially, or very far away. And here in Canada we have a gigantic country, and for us to be able to send a message that is received, let's say from Toronto or Ottawa, and reaches Vancouver, right, that's having to go around this world, right? And usually if you send a message, it just goes straight that way. Well, you want it to go all the way here, right? So that means the ionosphere bounces that radio signal all the way to its intended destination. And what is also very cool about Alouette 1, it was only intended to be up there for about 1 year, to be functional for a year. It ended up lasting and being functional for 10 years, which at that time was an incredible engineering feat. No human-made object had been functional for more than 1 year at the time Alouette 1 was launched, meaning that it was, at that time, the most successful technological achievement with respect to outer space travel. Let's just take a real quick look here before we start painting. Actually, you know what? Let's get right into the drawing here, because that's going to take me a second. and then we'll come back and take a look at some of the history. So let's just zoom back out here, because I could talk. I love I love some of this technical information. So let's. I don't know why I put that under first. I usually tape this down and then put the carbon paper underneath. So here we go. So a lot of this is going to get covered with paint very shortly here, so I'm not going to put in a lot of detail. But I'm going to draw the general shape of this object here. I have been thinking all day long about exactly the way that I want to paint this painting, because there's many different techniques that I've used throughout these episodes, and so which technique do I want to use? And I was even thinking maybe I should do 2 or 3 different versions of today's painting in order to demonstrate those different techniques. But I think I'm going to keep it pretty straightforward and just do one. So I'm doing the outline of inside here. Now this is all going to be all black, so I'm not even going to bother outlining where these stars are going to go. Although I imagine some people would say that that's, you know, it would be cool to get all of the constellations in their right place. But I'm not even going to bother doing any of these details here. We'll figure that out. So let's just take a look at how that looks. This carbon paper is starting, you know, it's had a few uses, so it's not transferring the image to, there's not a lot, like, it's not as dark even as this side, right? So this is two-sided carbon paper. So you could see on this side, it transferred better than on this side. Now, just realizing I didn't sand this, which is, I was going to do it beforehand, and I decided, no, I'll do it on camera, and then I forgot to do it on camera. So, let's... Okay. So I think I'm gonna put some of my typical warm yellow on this painting as I do almost every single episode, even though it's gonna get almost completely covered up, because I always just feel that it gives the painting an extra little bit of warmth. And when we're about to make a painting of outer space can be a very cold and inhospitable kind of place. So if there's any kind of warmth that can come through, then I think this painting might be something that people want to hang in their homes. Because if it looks really cold and unwelcoming, and it's like, okay, that's great, but I don't know if I want a cold, unwelcoming painting in my home, right? So this is going to create a super, super subtle effect, but there is an effect, right? You know, to use a food analogy, as I like to often do, you know, it's like a little bit of cinnamon sprinkled in craft dinner. Has anybody ever done that before? I can't remember where I learned that. When I was like a teenager, I think I must have gone over to a friend's home and they put some cinnamon on their macaroni and cheese. And I was like, really? That's weird. That's gross. And then I did it. I was like, oh, that's what a weird, like, it kind of elevates the cheap $1 macaroni and cheese into something just a little bit better. Like, it becomes 10% better. And why not, right? So okay. So this is a little bit streaky, but actually, you know what I was gonna say? It's okay if it's, well, and then I just make it even worse. So, but I was gonna leave it like that, and I thought, well, there was a little bit of extra texture there, and even though I'm not gonna see it, or I might actually see it if that texture is too textural. So let's just, if I can make it look a little bit better, then let's make it a little bit better. Okay, there we go. So also, just because I'm a little bit nuts, I like just to have just a nice clean work surface. And maybe while I'm right here, let's start getting some paints on the palette. Oh, I see lots of people joining the chat here. Very cool. So, if you're new to the channel, you've never seen me before, welcome. Hit the subscribe button, hit that like button right now, and that way we can see each other every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 o'clock Pacific time. I've been here every single Tuesday and Thursday for the past year. Haven't missed a single day. So you can set your watch by it. Sometimes I'm a minute late getting set up, but I'm here. And if I'm late, then that generally means I'm in a bit of a panic mode because something's not working right. So, oh, there's, okay. And I've seen that in the chat a few times. Uh-oh, Michael's running a little bit late. That he's probably losing his mind right now. And I'm usually, because it's like something crashed, the computer crashed right before we go live, or as I'm trying to go live. So, which is, you know, it's funny, like, to think of, you know, technology breaking down, and while we're talking about this, because this machine, in fact, it was deactivated. Like, it was still working, and after 10 years, so it was launched in 62. By 72, you know, we're talking, people have been on the moon for, you know, 5 missions to the moon, and it was still working. And by that point, the technology had advanced by leaps and bounds, and they're like, well, I guess we'll just shut it off. So it's actually still orbiting the Earth. They expect it to still be in space until about 2066, at which point it will probably it'll crash down somewhere on the Earth, as satellites eventually do. The orbit slowly degrades, and every few years you hear about a satellite that was launched, you know, 50 years ago that is finally crashing down to Earth. And sometimes it can be pretty dangerous. Hopefully, and sometimes they have to divert the pathway somehow. Anyway, so I'm going to blow dry this in a moment just to speed up this drying process. And Then I'll take a look at some of the comments. So I'm just going to mute the microphone for one moment so I don't blow your eardrums out. Okay, so let's actually I'm just gonna go right to the image. We'll start painting it, and then maybe I'll go back into the diagrams and technical information and geek out on that. So let's look here and think about how to approach this, because there's lots of different ways that we could make this painting. And that's weird. What's going on with my computer screen? Interesting. I guess it doesn't show up on camera. Okay, which is good news. So there's a few different ways that we could do this. One way is that we could use some very thick paint, and then we could do some blending. What painting did we do that with? We did one, I'm trying to remember. We did one with thick paint and blended it that way, and that's one way of working. There's another way. So sorry, to explain how that would work, let me just sort of. So one way to do it is that we could apply some black paint up here. Like we pre-mix everything, and we're going to pre-mix a bunch of things anyway, but you could pre-mix a black or a dark gray or a really dark blue would be my recommendations, and have a big thick mixture ready to go, and then pre-mix some cold blue, and then paint the black, and then paint the cold blue, and then kind of blend them together while they're wet. So that's one option. Another option would be to paint this all black, and then to glaze some cold blue back up over top of this area slowly. Another way to do it would be to do the same sort of thing, paint this all black, and then to paint, kind of like what we did with the Agnes Pelton painting, is paint little bits, like almost like impressionist marks, like pointillist kind of little marks, and slowly get less and less pigment in there, almost like a glaze as well. To do that last step, that would probably be the best if you're in a very hot environment, like a very dry, hot environment where the paint is drying very, very quickly. So, of those three methods, I'm going to think about it. I'm honestly not sure which one I want to do. So I'm going to work my way there. And so the first thing I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to paint, let's paint some cold blue back here. And kind of on the horizon, sorry. Cold blue right here on the horizon. And we'll paint some warm blue for the earth. And then I'll think about how I want to approach that part there. So let's start out with some white and cold blue. Maybe even a bit more white in here. I had a whole other thought of just painting the entire sky first and then eyeballing the satellite. That would be the most advanced technique of doing it, because obviously you'd have to draw the satellite back out on your own. I figured for a beginner's class that could be asking a little bit too much. Maybe before I go one step further, I want to bring this line of the earth and make it just more visible to me. Make sure I can get this kind of straight. So I'm gonna paint this. I'm thinking as I'm doing this, wasn't expecting to do this, but I might blend the black onto the blue. Typically I kind of bring the lighter color on top of the darker color like that. So I'm going to go kind of the opposite. So I'm just giving kind of you could think of almost like a runway for the black to come down here. Now there's certainly not this much black in the photograph there. Or sorry, not this much blue in the photograph, but this will certainly give me lots of room to play with as I darken and give, because what I want is this glow of the earth from the other side here. And you know what? I think I'm going to continue this down here as well. Maybe let's make it just a bit more blue. So here's just a little bit less cold blue. Or sorry, a little bit less white in my cold blue. And I'm looking to and in fact, you know what? I'm going to take this, do the same thing right across here. And we'll paint some warm blue over top of this cool space. Alright, so you see we've kind of lost a little bit of the shape of the earth, but we can tinker and bring it all back. And I kind of don't mind that this is kind of, there's a little bit of, it's not quite clear where the edge of the earth and where the space begins there. But we'll come back to this here. So, and if anything, that might help if it's a little bit, if this line isn't quite as clean all the way through. Okay. So that's what I want to do is I'm going to let this, in fact, let's blow dry it, and I think I'm going to do it again just so I can get a really nice solid colors down here. Wow, very active in the chat, everybody. Let me, I gotta take a look here. I'm gonna blow dry this again. Okay, so how about this time I'm going to work my way back the opposite direction. So let's just take some of this cold blue with a little bit of white. And we're going to put some warmer blue over top of it. In fact, I kind of like that dry brush. That's kind of cool. It kind of, I'll have to think about that. I wasn't thinking about using a dry brush to get that effect, but it does have a kind of cool atmospheric effect. I don't know. Let me think about it. I wasn't planning on doing it, and we're not anywhere near being finished that aspect of things, so I'm not going to overthink it at this moment. Okay. So now I'm going to get some more white on here. And I just want this to be a little bit more solid. And you can see this line is not going across very well. So it's my job to kind of in fact, let's just it's getting sloppier and sloppier as I go. That's okay though. Okay, I got all this white reappearing in the brush. That's okay. This is all going to go warmer blue here eventually. So I'm not concerned about that. Really, it's this line across here. Okay. And actually, I'm going to keep... Oh, you know what I want? I got too much white in there, so I'm going to clean this brush off. And let's mix a dark color now. And where should I do that? So I'm going to do this right up here, and I'm going to take all this warm red, mix it in with this cool blue. I'm going to just use the colors I have here rather than using black. If I want to, I can use black later, but one of the things I might want to do, I haven't thought about this, but you know, if I paint the background black and then I'd want to put some details in the foreground and I want to use black, then there's going to be the space is going to be very flat, right? and I want this space to have a lot of depth. So even though space is technically black, if I paint it black, it's going to want to come in front of the spaceship. Right, so I've mixed this really dark color. You know, it's going to be dark enough, surely, than anything else in this picture. And I'm going to be cropping out some of these antennas. And then we'll paint the antennas back in later. Okay. Let's just get these to about the same place here. Okay. So I'm going to blow dry this, and then I'm going to paint that background one more time so we get a nice dark sky. Although again, it's not going to be black, it's going to be really dark gray, so that if I do want, and maybe I'll do this, even though I don't usually use black, I could do a little bit of black on here, and then you'll see like, oh, that's cool, because now I actually see how the black in the spaceship makes it sit in front of the dark but not black sky or space in behind, right? So, and the reason why I'm going to do a second coat is you can see it's a little bit patchy there, so I want to get rid of that in my second coat here. So I'm going to mute one more. Okay, so do we have enough of this? We're gonna need to make more of it anyway, just for the glaze. So let's just get a little bit. Actually, I do have a little bit of this. Here, we'll use this. Now I went a little bit further down this area that I called sort of like a landing strip than I was expecting. I don't know what I was necessarily thinking there. I probably should have kept a little bit higher than I did, so I'm not going to go quite as far down with the second coat of paint. Just really want to make sure I've covered everything. So obviously this is also much easier than doing if you tried to paint those little stars and then paint around them. Can you imagine how much of a nightmare that would be? Okay. So I'm just looking for any weird texture that's kind of popping up, because sometimes it catches the light in a weird way that is just really unflattering to the painting. So okay, so I'm gonna glaze with black down here, and then I might go a little bit back over top of it depending on how successful or not that happens to be. So I'm going to go to a smaller brush here. And don't worry about painting on top of the satellite. The only thing, you just want to kind of keep a little bit of the idea of the structure. You can see I painted right over here. I'm going to paint some white back over there in a few minutes. Okay. Excuse me. So next I'm going to use Satin Glazing fluid. And I'm going to put Satin Glazing fluid here on my palette. I'm going to use what's called a mop brush. And I'm going to use a fairly small brush for this, right? Because, and one reason why I position, because I actually, this is not a photo that exists anywhere, right? There was no camera crew following alongside Alouette 1 as it was in space. What we see here is a photograph of the satellite. I think this is a model that is on display at I think the Canadian Museum of Civilization, I think. And then just a photograph I found of Earth taken from the space station, and then I used Photoshop to stitch them together. But I deliberately put the satellite sort of in this area for our purpose so that we could kind of work on one side and the other side. Rather than if we try to use this technique to do the whole thing, it might lead to a little bit more of a patchy kind of quality. So let's take our glazing fluid and get some paint mixed into it. And there's so many different ways to go about this. As I'm doing it, I'm thinking, which way should we do it? I think what I might do is start down here. So this is, we're going to darken progressively this way. So I'm just trying to get this little halo of light here. Now again, there's lots of different ways we could go about this, as I said, but this is the way I'm going to approach today's painting. Okay. So very subtle. And now before I do anything else, I'm just going to blow dry this, and then I'm going to do this a few times until we get a nice even transition from this bright area here into the black darkness of space. Okay, and there's not really, I'm just going to take the same paint, maybe a little bit more pigment on it, and then let's just kind of go up a little bit higher. Okay, I'm just going to keep on doing this as slowly we're going to raise it. Okay, now I'm going to go for a little bit more pigment on here. I'm also going to put a little bit more glazing fluid, because the glazing fluid, you know, it helps keep things open or the paint wet a little bit longer. But I do find, like, it starts to get kind of tacky quickly. So I add a little bit more glazing fluid, but I'm also adding more paint to it. And you can see, let's go darker here. I knew that was gonna, there was a little spot of texture in the gesso, and I didn't sand my canvas, and now I'm being punished for it. Paintings always will punish you for that one thing that you're looking at thinking, I wonder if that's gonna be a problem. Yeah, it's gonna make me, yeah, it's gonna drive me nuts. Okay. Okay, so let's blow dry this again. And we're almost there, right? We could do a couple more and then we'll be done. Again, just a bit more glazing fluid, more dark paint. This is way, if I tried to just do this without any glazing fluid, it would drive me absolutely bonkers, because just the regular acrylic paint on its own without any glazing fluid just is not conducive to much blending. It doesn't behave very well. That's I went a little bit too far down there. Ay, ay, ay. It's always like, and I do this every single episode when I try to do glazing, is sometimes I just like, oh, I'm gonna fix it really quick, I'm gonna get that fix in right now, and it always punishes me for that. Okay. So this area here kind of drives me crazy. I'm pretty happy with the way this side turned out. Here, I'm actually going to put more glazing fluid and just do a lighter glaze and fix that. But I'm going to blow dry it one more time and then we should be done. Okay, so see a bit of glazing fluid all by itself. And actually, let's just wipe off this existing paint on here, get a bit more of what was here. So this is sort of like a little repair that I can do. Or not. It's not repairing very well. I think it must have been just a little bit wet when I tried to do that, which is a little frustrating. So I'm going to blow dry. So part of the issue is I've put a bunch of layers on here very quickly. There we go. There we go. Big egghead in the way there. Yeah, it's good enough, right? It's good enough. I could work on this for a while, but I think it's one of these things that only I am going to care about. So, and if I want, I could possibly do some touch-ups on that later. So what I'm going to do now is, let's get some white on here. And I'm just going to touch this. In fact, I could mix... No, I'm going to use just straight on white for this here. Just to touch up the painting and clean up. So I'm gonna go in here and I want to try to straighten up. And you can see here's maybe where I really should have gone a little bit wider. So I'm just gonna widen the spacecraft a little bit here. It might even help if we look at this and think about, we might have to do a little bit of surgery here. Now I think probably a little bit like there. Is that closer? We'll play it a little bit safe at first, and then we can make changes as needed, right? And just making sure I don't have big areas of texture. Now I'm going to paint a kind of a golden color over top of this here shortly. But I'm putting the white down because it's going to help hide the black of space intruding onto the spaceship itself. Oops, sorry. It's hard to get these details without getting your big head in the way. Ah. Okay. And you know what, like, if your version of today's painting starts to go a little bit haywire, you could easily turn this into like a fun space alien spaceship or something, right? So, and you never have to tell anybody what it was supposed to be. No one has to know what it was supposed to be, or what it began as. Now, I'm not exactly, I'm putting these, I've lost a little bit of the shape of the satellite, so I'm putting that down there right now, and then I'm gonna have to redraw a little bit to find where kind of the corners are, right? I can still have these ones up here, they're pretty clear, but down here it's a little more ambiguous. So let's just, again, making sure I don't have any big areas of texture, because I'm trying to like hide that I did this, right? So it'll become invisible later on, so I want to make sure it's invisible. So I'm just going to blow dry this to speed up this process. Sorry. It just occurred to me that I could have put tape down and painted over top of the tape, as we've done in a few other episodes. But if I forgot to do that, that's okay too. Right? So now let's just take a quick look at this drawing. Okay. Okay, now this one comes in. That's pretty good. Okay. Think about, like, if I take a dotted line and I come down here, these should be roughly the same length, so it should be something like that. Right, I could even measure them out if I wanted. And then okay. That's pretty, so I'm pretty good. I'm kind of in the zone, and as I put the next coat of paint on here, I'll everything will kind of come together. Now, I'm just debating, should I put some... To get this color, we're basically looking at a brown, like a sandy brown. So it's, or like you could see this kind of orangey, so it's kind of we want a warmer brown anyway. And there's going to be a lot of white in it. So let's mix a brown. Let's see how close we can get to this color. Oh, I need some more warm red. Because like gold is like a warmer brown basically. It's a lot of red. Maybe not. I don't need quite so much red on here. Let's take a bunch of warm yellow, a little bit of red, and a little bit of blue. Okay. Oh, come on. So we've got, this is, I like this color right now, but it's obviously not quite right. So let's add some white in here. Now we can start getting pretty darn close to the original. Just take some more white. So that's good for right now. I'm just wondering if I'm just wondering if I should paint these lines a dark color right now so that I don't lose them. In fact, you know what I think I might do is make a darker version of this color that I'll paint, and then I can kind of paint around it as if these are the, yeah, that's what I'll do here. So let's take this same color and maybe let's mix it to the side here. That's a bit greenish, so put a little bit too much red in there. If I want, I can take a bit of this, my dark color. Okay. What do I do with that tiny brush? I had a small brush and then I just lost it. Okay, so let's just use this one instead. So let's take a moment to, I'm going to go over these lines. I'm not going to be too careful about doing it. But these lines are going to act as like the darker areas in between these solar panels, which is again another early advancement here for 1962 to have part of this spacecraft using solar panels. It is also engineering achievement. I put some links in the description to some great videos that were produced. They talk more in depth about sort of the science behind this spacecraft and why it's such a big deal. It kind of reminds me of, you know, some of the spacecraft like Voyager, which I'm obsessed with, the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 spacecrafts, which again were only supposed to last for a couple of years, and you know, they were launched around the same time. The Voyager 1 and 2 are, I think, mid-70s, early 70s, some, you know, maybe, it could be 73 or 76 or something around there. But those spaceships have been running and working, not at full capacity, mind you, but they've now both left our solar system. You know, they are, you know, billions of kilometers away from the Earth at this point, long past Pluto and Uranus and Jupiter. I mean, they passed Jupiter and Saturn like in the late 70s. Okay. Again, you can see I'm kind of being a little bit sloppy here because I'm going to clean this up with my next layer of paint, that one that I mixed there a few minutes ago. I was thinking of going even darker and then painting right over all of this. I thought, well, what if I could still do that, but I thought maybe I'll use this as a different approach. I'm always thinking of using different approaches when I'm, not just when I'm teaching, but even when I'm painting on my own artworks. It's always kind of fun just to do a different approach. Like, I generally don't ever glaze darker. I usually glaze lighter over top of a darker background. So it's kind of fun for me just to kind of, let's just do the opposite of what we normally do, right? Okay. But I think it's like, as an artist, it's always valuable just to push yourself a little bit each time you're making a painting, and so that it's not getting boring. And if anything, you're always learning something, testing your knowledge. And well, he says, it looks, I'm super late, it looks like a complicated one today. I don't know. I don't know if this is super complicated. I hope I haven't made it too complicated at the beginning, the outset here. So I think while I still have a little bit of this dark color still wet on my palette, just see. Go. Why not just touch it up a little bit when you see it? Now, if there are little problems here and there, like for instance, this little bit of texture, right? If I'd sanded the canvas, this wouldn't be here. But this little lump that was in the gesso, you know, I could turn this into maybe another little satellite or a star or something in the sky here. So let's now go to, there's this brush. No, that's, there we are. This color. I'm just curious if I add a little bit of cool blue. I want to see what a cool brown would look like here. Just testing out a hypothesis, just in terms of color mixing. See if I could get a little more accuracy with this color. I still think I'm going to use my warmer red, and then I can always glaze and change it a little bit, but okay. So here's this warm brown that I made. And let's now just, I'm going to start painting it into these spots. This is maybe a little bit more peachy than I would have liked, so I think it probably could have used a little bit more white in here. Maybe a little bit less red. And I could, I mean, I'm not trapped or locked into anything. I can always make any change I want. But let's see what it looks like when we're a little bit further down. Like, notice, like, just the way that I approach painting is I'm never too worried at the beginning stages of a painting about getting the colors right. I'm more interested in just getting things kind of starting to fill up the canvas, because it's so hard to judge how sort of quote-unquote right a color is when there's so much of the painting left unfinished. So I always use this kind of technique of doing a couple of coats of paint to, as a, just sort of an opportunity to test things out. You know, if I wanted to make myself look really, really smart, I would make this painting beforehand, figure out all of the things to do, work out all the problems, and then I would do it in, you know, on camera, and do everything perfect without having to do any thinking, and everyone would just think I'm like a genius because, like, wow, yeah, I just look at it and I get the colors right each and every time. First of all, I just don't have the time to do 2 versions of each painting. Second of all, I don't really care if people see me making mistakes, and I also think it goes against sort of my philosophy behind painting and the whole reason why I'm doing this anyway, which is to open up the artist's studio and make it more accessible to people, so that more people can learn how to paint, and people seeing the painting process and how an artist figures things out. From all of the feedback I get is people really appreciate that. So I think maybe non-painters or people who aren't interested in learning about painting would probably want to see the more genius presentation. They want to see just blow my mind, right? But anyone who wants to learn how to paint is like, well, that's great, but I still don't understand how that was done. Like, you know, I want something that's a little bit more transparent. So it's kind of part of my, you know, maybe it's because I'm also a teacher, that I just don't think it's very helpful for people. So, and I remember as an artist, you know, as a student, just sort of like being constantly mystified by things and being kind of frustrated that so much of like the art making process was opaque and secretive, and I've talked many times about why artists have traditionally been secretive. One of the more interesting reasons why artists were very secretive is that, and this is all documented in an excellent book and film called The Secret Knowledge, about David Hockney. And David Hockney is an artist we explored way back about a year ago in our Intro to Painting course, where we painted a painting of his 2 dogs. And in that book that David Hockney co-authored with I can't remember his first name. He's a doc. I'll just call him Dr. Falco. And they authored the Hockney-Falco hypothesis about artists using early proto-camera devices to improve the paintings and the accuracy of the likenesses of portraits, etc. But one of the reasons artists were so secretive is, like artists like Leonardo, etc., is, is mirrors and lenses were seen as potential. First of all, they were very expensive to own, but the mere owning of them could get you in trouble with the Inquisition and the Church. Leonardo's contemporary, Galileo, was thrown in jail for suggesting that the Earth orbited around the Sun, right? And it's really interesting because at the back of this big book, there's all these letters, and some of them are from the period of Leonardo, talking about the fear of their mirror or lens being discovered, because it suggested that you might also be looking into the stars and questioning the Church and orthodoxy of the Earth being the center of the universe. So, dangerous times they were. Okay, so here's where I am. Again, this color is not exactly the color that I want. So, but do I care? I don't know. It might be interesting to do a little quick investigation here. I haven't done this in a while, so give me a moment to see if I can. Okay. So I'm using this website where I'm going to upload the image we're using today. Right, so, and the links to this are in the description below. It's under like color matching tools. It's again in the video description. And so I just uploaded literally today's image, and let's just go to here, and this helps us kind of to isolate the color. And I'm looking here again for the local color, and if I look at it, this is the number it's giving me here, the hex number. And for some people this doesn't make any sense, but this is another website as well. So what this is telling me here is obviously this is a brown, and it's actually a little bit more on the cool side. So here's my warm blues and cool blues. Here's my warm reds, right? So actually this color, basically, it's kind of like when I mix my dark color, right? So if anything, it's almost like a perfect gray, but just got maybe a little bit more warm red in it. So let's test this out and see if we can get a little bit closer to it. So let me get some more white on the palette. Because sometimes like a color can be pretty tricky to see. So which view should we, let's go to this one here. So I'm gonna, here's this cool blue. So let's take some cool blue. Let's mix it right here. Right, and then we've got warm red, and it's warm because it's right here on the edge of the warm yellow. Right, so when we mix these together, we're going to get a gray. It's primarily warm red. So let's mix this in here, and maybe a bit of warm yellow as well, maybe not too much. That's pretty good. Now let's take some white, add it to that. Okay, still a little purpley, so let's add some more yellow into the paint here. We're pretty close. That's pretty close to that color, isn't it? And so if I back, actually, let's go here. So that's, oddly enough, the color I just mixed is really pretty close to this color. Right? So how about let's try, I still feel like I want it to be a bit more yellowy. And maybe have a bit more white in here. Okay, so you can see what the effect that color has. I'm going to paint this in here. I'm just going to follow a bit more. Is that too much white in there? What other one has this? Let's put this up here. So I'm looking for the other panels on this spaceship which are reflecting roughly the same color. Now let's go back to this again, to color picker. Let's now go to one of these brighter panels here. Let's you can really see. Come on. This in here, and again this now shows us we're still using this cool blue, and now we basically have a much brighter, like orangey yellow to get there. So let's come back out here. So in our highlights, this is very geeky kind of stuff, but if you're wanting to get a little more specific with your colors, here's how we can do it. I need to forget the white in here, because it's very white. Let's do this one. Now I'll probably, before I finish, I might put a little bit of a blue glaze on these, because we want some of this light that is flying over the earth to be reflected in this painting, right? anything else that's really bright. How about let's go the other way and get a few darker ones in here. Actually, let's use some of this warm yellow in here from here. Then after this, we'll paint the solar panels on there. Let's get more warm yellow. Let's see if I just paint this warm yellow. Oh. It's kind of fun. I like playing around with these very subtle colors. There's like a reminds me a bit of the Giorgio Morandi that we did a long time ago. It has there's some kind of slightly abstract quality to this. This is just, it's great. see, you guys are having a conversation about vaccines and COVID. I cannot recommend strongly enough the need to get a vaccine. I come from a family of doctors. My sister works in a hospital in an emergency room in Sydney, Australia, and every couple of weeks we do a family FaceTime, and hearing about the horrors of people, young people, not just people who are older, but young people coming into the hospital and dying because of COVID. Oh my goodness. And like 90% of the people or more that are getting sick are people that don't have the vaccine. And people can still get sick if they have the vaccine, but the likelihood of them dying is very, very low. So, you know, the reason why we don't have polio anymore, at least not in North America, vaccines, right? Like, please, if you have an opportunity to get vaccinated, there's almost everyone does now here on Earth, please get vaccinated. It'd be great for us to all to be able to go back to our lives as normal if you can. So, but without getting into a whole argument about that, that's all I'll say about that. Okay, so here I've got some colors in place. They're not all exactly the right colors. I did show, you know, some techniques that we could use to actually match the colors a little bit closer using those online tools. But now let's put in the blue of these tiles on in here. So since we use that tool, let's match the colors for the let's see. So we can get this color in. Oh, that's a beautiful color, this teal. I can already tell it's a bit on the colder side. Okay, so you can see right down here, this color is right. It's cool. It's cool blue with a little bit of cool yellow in it. So we're getting into the cold greens, right? And then it's sort of also being modified with a little bit of warm red on the other side, which gives us a bit of that grayish quality too, right? So let's to do this, the way that let's take this, let's do it right here. In fact, I might just get a little bit more cold blue. And let's take some cold yellow, and we'll mix this kind of nice, beautiful color in here. I'll add a little bit of, well, let's add a bunch of white, but that's going to help take us into the teal zone. And we'll just reach right across the aisle here to some warm red. Oh, gosh, I can't even see anything I'm doing. My apologies. Okay, so I took my cold blue and I added cold yellow to it and made a green. Then I added some white and we got a teal. And then now I'm just going across here with some warm red, and I bring this into the color, and it goes back into that really, really dark color that we've used many, many times. You can see here we are. We basically have the exact color. Now, we're going to modify it. Some of it will be a little brighter, some of it will be a little bit darker. Actually, just thinking how I want to approach all of these tiles. Now, I don't think I'm going to paint hundreds of little tiny blue squares here, so I will probably do some larger areas, but I don't really have all my brushes are pretty chewed up. I'm still waiting for some ones I ordered off of Amazon, the same ones that I ordered before. So I ordered them about a month ago. I don't know why it's taken so long, but so let's we can have some fun, and we don't have to make them exactly like this. So let's see. And if anything, you know, I could paint it, and then rather than trying to do little tiny things, I could divide it back up later on with like this kind of background color. I don't know. I'll see. Let's do another one right here. Maybe I'll just add a little bit more blue to this one, because we want it to be a little bit different each time, right? Because just like these panels, it's going to have slightly different color. It's facing, it's getting different kinds of light on it, right? Where was our center? You know, obviously you can draw all this out if you want. I'm just gonna keep mine kind of rough. Let's do the one down below. some of them are getting a little out of shape, but that's okay. Especially, it's the accumulation of these. So while some of them might look a little bit funky and weird, by the time all of them are done, they're not going to be so noticeable. And if anything, it'll just sort of go into the charm of the painting. As I say all the time, I'm not interested in being a robot, so I don't care if there's the handmade quality features prominently in my artwork, right? If I wanted to do this perfectly, I'd probably just use a computer, and you know, I have the digital image which I created on the computer already, right? But I want to make a painting out of this, so I want it to have a little bit more of a looser quality anyway. Okay, so you notice I'm painting all the areas that have similar sort of colored backgrounds, right? So when I do these ones, they're going to be a little bit darker, right? So maybe for let's see, I got this one here. This one over here too before I alter my mixture a bit. Okay, so this one's a little bit darker. So I'm going to take a bit of warm red and just mix it in here, a bit more warm blue. We'll get a bit of a darker color. It's not super radically different, but it should be a little bit, and that's what we want. Okay. Anything else that's a little bit darker? I think I'm still going to use this one. I think it's already pretty dark for this area up here. And of course, if I am not super happy and I think it should be darker, I can always just glaze something a little bit darker over top of all of this once I get a little closer to being done. Okay, maybe I'll even go a little bit more darker here, a little bit more paint. Okay. Now this area here, I guess it's the same thing, but inside we have a circle. And I'm debating whether I want to put the whatchamacallit, the extension tubes, the stem as they were called, these giant antennas that unfurled from either side, which are also a major technical achievement. I think I'm going to paint this as if I'm going to eliminate that cylinder at first. I'll do that on both sides, and then I'm going to paint the tube and antenna in there afterwards. Oh. Okay. So now let's go the opposite direction. Let's take a bunch more white. Let's just get rid of this. Clean up as I go a bit here. Not happy with the way that goes up there. Let me think about that and if I want to fix it or anything. I'm not pleased. My mom is in the chat now. How you doing, Mom? Good to see you. There's lots of messages going back and forth, so I'm not don't have a chance to read all of them here, so I'm just gonna keep on painting away. Now, this side was darker. And this one is really light, so even more white on here. Just barely visible, right? Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to do that here as well. Even though it's different than the image, I kind of like that look. It really helps emphasize how one side is significantly brighter than the other. Right, very subtle. I like that. That's cool. So these basically, I think what I'll do now is I'm going to mix a brown again. Warm yellow, warm blue, and warm red. I'm just going to use a bit of a bigger brush to do this. Using a tiny brush to blend colors is a real pain in the butt, so. Cool, so this is a nice little brown. And I'll just gonna go back over some of these lines, maybe not all of them. To more dark lines. So this is kind of like doing the outlining on anything else we've done. There's some places, rather than dark lines, there's going to be bright lines, highlights where the light is catching this super reflective metallic surface. And it's going to be the modulation of the light and the dark, which is going to make for a really successful painting here. And so while we could do this much faster by just throwing colors in here, you know, if we want to try to get close to the original, then we have to take a little bit of time to and some of these I'm gonna have both dark and light next to one another. And I may even darken some of these lines even further. Okay. Okay. So let's go the opposite way. I'm going to add a bunch of white to this color. So take some white. And this may not even be bright enough. We'll see. Maybe, okay, I think after I do a little bit more of these lines, I'll go down and do the earth, because that's something I've neglected here for a while, so. It might be a little bit, well, it's okay. I was gonna say maybe it's a bit bright. So what I want to do now is these vents, or not vents, but where the antennas come out of. So put those in as placeholders. Now these antennas coming off of here, I'm gonna use, actually let's take a moment. I'm gonna blow dry this just because there's a bunch of wet paint on there, and then I'll start putting some antennas in. We'll do the earth and stars, and we'll see where we're at. I've got a ruler here for a moment from now. Okay. Let's put some of these antennas on here. So I'm just going to use a ruler just to help me identify where these are supposed to go. So let's say, imagine this line. If I was to think about where it's going to start right here, but if I was to draw an imaginary line, where else could I see it connecting? I could almost see it connecting here. Does that make sense? Like where this area is here. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, if I can do a little bit of accuracy. Now I'm not sure, you probably can't see that because pencil line, you can kind of see it there, I guess, right? And I can paint that in. So let's do the opposite. Where does this one come down? Could we see it connecting down to this spot, maybe? And again, it's... Oh, there you are. You can see those pencil lines there. Just dark enough for me, or light enough, or whatever way you want to think about it, for me to see, because I'm the only person who really needs to see it anyway, right? How about this one going right up through the middle here? So I want it to be perpendicular to everything else here. So if we can identify, you know, this, let's say, is the middle down here, and the middle up here, then we'll draw that line through. It's worth just taking a second to make sure you're happy with where it's going to go. The other thing too is if you've drawn it in, you can also kind of just, but when you paint it, kind of tilt it a little bit in either direction. Okay, and then we've got this one here. So if we were to draw this line right, could it connect down to the bottom down there? There to here. And the other one on the other side we can't really see too much of. It is pretty straight up. I'm just going to give it a slight bit more of a tilt and make it pretty small. So now you can see those pencil lines I just painted in there, right? So let's take care of this, and then I think we'll move on to the earth. We'll explore the earth. So let's mix a bit more of our original color. I always drive myself crazy by trying to use the last remnants of paint. When I could just use some fresh paint here. I wonder if anyone is actually painting this painting. It wouldn't surprise me if most of you are painting something else. And just listening, but you never know. I never know with these shows. Sometimes I'm surprised and everyone's painted the same thing, and sometimes I'm the only one who's done this painting. Now, with this one here, I think I'm going to first paint it darker, and then I'll paint it brighter afterwards, because I want to... so I'm taking... That way I can get a little bit of a shadow on here. Let that sit for now. Maybe while that's there. Needs to be darker, but we'll get there. Okay, let's go back to Paula says, I'm painting along, but I find the color mixing so far out. I'm still a beginner. Oh, Paula, don't sell yourself short. You've been painting with me for a long time now, and you do great work, so... this one's a little trickier. You know, these sort of metallic surfaces and colors are really tricky. It's all about like subtlety and trying to identify like the right color, whether it's warm or cool, or how to mix it. You know, is challenged me today as well. So it's not as if everything we're doing is really simple and straightforward. I would imagine most artists would have a little bit of a challenge doing this painting. Okay. Now I'm going to go over top of this line. I'm going to get more white on this one since it's closest to us. I want to kind of leap forward a little bit. Same thing. darkest color. Just taking like a bit of a dark color here and just adding a couple of bits of darkness. That's going to help with give it the sense of some reflections. Okay. Whew. How are we doing? Okay. So it always takes longer than expected. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy. I didn't quite get these panels bright enough. And I could glaze over them to brighten them up, but I'm just gonna leave it like that. I think it's okay. Okay. Let's take a second here to have some tea. You know, I could just walk away right now and feel pretty satisfied. If I look at the earth here, now there's some there's clouds and darker areas of the water. Can't really see if there's any earth, like ground under here so much. There's obviously some brighter lights, which I didn't even think about doing. We could add some brighter highlight of reflections in there, although in this painting the light is coming more from kind of this bottom, kind of this side than this side. So it would make more sense if I do want to put that, it looks like to me that the sun is maybe on back over here and shining over here, so that probably wouldn't be so bright. So if anything, this area might be brighter, or we wouldn't even see that. It would be kind of behind us. Like if we were taking this photograph, we're standing on a spaceship looking out the porthole and we see this, all of this would be actually, because of the way I've painted these reflections, this area here would be probably very, very dark. So let's play around here and get a little bit darker. Let's take some warm blue. Where do I have room for this? Okay, let's take some warm blue and let's put it over here. So I'm going to take a bit of warm yellow. That's really green. I didn't want it to go quite that green. So let's just wipe that off. Take some warm blue again. Where should we put this? We should go down here, maybe? So I'm going to let my brush start to get kind of dry. I'm not really looking at the image. I should have probably done this earlier, but here we are, right? So the one thing that makes me a little bit anxious of doing this now is the potential for it to look like this thing is like growing out of the earth, right? So I'm really gonna have to be very careful here. Probably lightening this up significantly with some white over top there. Just taking some green. Kind of simulate we've got some land masses under here. I'm gonna add some white to this color. And actually I'm gonna add white to it, and I'm gonna add some glazing fluid so that it's not just a big bright white, but it's a little bit more transparent. Okay. I'm going to do that with warm blue as well. Where is it? Take my glazing fluid, just a little bit. And this warm blue. A little bit of white. Just add a little more white into this mixture. I'll probably go back over that some of these areas here just to make sure that that sits right on front of everything, top of everything. And just softening up some of these edges. Oh no, I'm not super happy with much of this, but let's take some cool blue and glaze a bit with that. A little bit of a muddy cool blue. Maybe that will help push the satellite back forward again. Another thing I'm sort of trying to do is kind of get rid of any of the sharp details down here. Even though the photograph, we can see all of the, like, some pretty sharp details of clouds and everything. In this picture, I think we want all of this to be pretty soft down here. Too much detail is going to make it sort of compete with this, with the satellite, right? You know, I think we want a bit more of just that bit of a blurred background effect. Okay. And I think I'm pretty close. Like I don't know how much more I'm gonna work on it. So I think the last little details, I want to come back over top of here. I want to make sure these lines on the bottom are very sharp. As I've said many times, part of our job as artists is to help clarify things for the viewer so that they're not questioning what is what. It just sort of is you know, self-evident. It's not easy to do. But I think it's what we want to strive for, is clarity. Zoom back out. Okay. Another option, if you were finding that there was, like, that this object seemed to be kind of emerging from the earth as if it was growing out of the ground here, is to then, that would be when I would want to use a little bit of black, like put some black outline. In fact, should I use a bit of black? I don't want to use black, but let's just take a little bit of black. Let's just for, since I talked about it, it might be because I think we'll see the difference. Now, even this, I'm not even going to put just straight on black here. Let's just get some brown into that black. And where should I put this? haven't put the stars in yet either, if we're totally spaced out on that. Pardon the pun. So I'll put these little dabs of black in the darkest parts of the satellite. And that already starts just to yank it back right into our space. As opposed to being on the ground or anywhere else. Just got to be careful about going overboard here. Because if I'm not too careful, all of a sudden I'll be outlining everything with black, and then it'll kind of flatten it back out again. So I think that's good. Just a few little points, maybe. A little bit darker. Okay. Now I suppose, you know, when it comes to stars, it might be fun to maybe, because we could just put a bunch of little white dots here and there, and that would make for stars. It just occurs to me, what if we did, come on, like night sky over I'm looking, just sort of googling night sky. Not over Vancouver. What would be like night sky over, or like star constellations. Beach ball of death here. Come on, computer. Okay, that's okay. Finally, jeez. I think I'll just close a bunch of these tabs. We've already talked about all that. Star constellations. Anybody could put anyone in here, but I'm just thinking, what are some of the most... trying to think... what would have been visible? I could do like what it was visible at the time. I'm just trying to think. Our daughter, August 14th is what? Star sign, zodiac sign is Leo. So our daughter's a Leo. Is there a Leo? Star constellation Leo. Where is Leo? I know this is totally random here, so you guys are welcome to put whatever you want. It's located in the northern celestial hemisphere. Okay. Lying between Cancer and Virgo. Okay. So I'm going to put Leo in here just as a little nod to our daughter. But you can certainly put any other constellation that is meaningful to you. So the way that I like to do this, and when did we do? We did something similar on one of our last episodes of the Intro to Painting course, where we did the Kate Graham, what was it, the Northern Lights painting that she did. And so I'm going to take some glazing fluid, and let's get some cool blue in here, and some white. I kind of want, like in the image here, come on, that little bit of a glowing effect. So I'm taking some glazing fluid, and I'm going to paint this maybe a little bit bigger. So let's now go to this. Where should I paint it? Maybe up here, very subtly, with great subtlety. Let's start up here. So let's zoom in so you can see what I'm doing a little bit closer. Now, I'm not going to connect the stars like the zodiac symbol, or zodiac sign. I just want to put these in here. It's almost like it'll be a hidden message. So I'll let that dry, and then I'll put some white in it afterwards. Let's just kind of now do, I'm going to put lots of smaller stars, and because I've got this glazing fluid in there, they're going to be kind of obscured. Or not obscured, they're just going to be maybe a little bit less obvious, right? Just like I did here. So at this point, you'd be like, oh, I don't know. It's, you know, now as I start to kind of fill in the space around them, what is more obscure? So let's see. Oops, let's go this way. So I'd be curious if you're making this painting, what kind of constellations would you put in there, or planets? Even if you're not painting this painting, I'd be curious what your thoughts would be, how you would approach this. Maybe someone has got an even better idea than I had. Now, didn't it say that the Virgo was, which is I'm a Virgo, so where is the... Huh. Libra is next. Virgo's kind of above it. I know this is like totally uninteresting to anybody but myself. But if I'm going to make this painting, I might as well make it a little bit personal. And I would suggest you try to make every painting you make personal. I want one that shows Leo with everything else around it. Why is this so difficult? Sometimes you spend time on Google Images like this just looking around and you're like, why is that? Anyway, I think I'm just gonna, well, I want to make it, maybe I'll just I'm gonna put in my Virgo in here, and then maybe I'll put my wife's in here as well. So it doesn't matter if it's not exactly correct, right? Okay. I mean, I always think, like, this is what I tell my students. I was just talking to them the other day about this, is you want to try to make the work you're making personal and make it meaningful to you, because the more meaningful it is to you, the more you're likely to want to work on it and improve on it and fix it if it needs to be fixed, versus if it's just sort of like a random thing that you can't connect to, then how much energy are you really going to put into it, right? You're just be like, well, I'll just finish it. And Gemini is my wife's, so which... Right. Gemini, that's one complicated one. Holy smokes. Now we'll just fill this in. You can see, or I guess you can't see on the screen just right now, but on the other side, as things dry, they've kind of they've softened, not quite as visible as they are right now. Because part of this is the glazing fluid. It has a bit of, appears kind of white at first, and then as it dries, it gets a little bit less visible. So I want to make sure I'm getting both sides here equal. So I don't have one side that has way more stars than the other. So it looks I think a little bit brighter, these stars on camera, than they do in person. So I'm gonna blow dry this. If I was really concerned of how bright they are, I could always just glaze over top of them and just darken them a little bit. So I'm going to blow dry for a moment, and then this should darken everything. And then I might take a little bit of white and just sort of go into some of the bigger stars and make them look like that they're even brighter. This whole time my voice has been muted and I'm blabbing away. So I don't know when the last time I was chatting. What I did is I added some white and yellow, and I was just doing those little dots inside of the blue dots, because now it gives it that effect of they're kind of like there's that glow of light coming off of them, and I like that a lot. So maybe before I end, I'm going to take this same thing just putting some of this same yellow in a few places on the painting itself, just to kind of keep it integrated. I always want to make sure that colors aren't just sort of flying around there on the canvas by themselves, that they have, you know, friends they travel with. Go the opposite way. Just darken up here. Okay. You know what? Just want one more little line. I like that reflection. I think it works really well. Okay. So that I'm not sitting here for the next 5 hours painting. That's pretty cool. So, my name, as always, stays the same. It's not after, I'm so used to writing after. There was an Alouette 2, by the way, that was also launched on in 1965. It's not uncommon in space for them to build multiple satellites or that turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. It took me a little bit longer, probably most of the time just spending here doodling around with the zodiac constellations, but yeah, I can live with it. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for painting along with me one more time on this holiday here in Canada. Tomorrow we are going to be looking at Giuseppe Arcimboldo, and he is definitely one of the weirdest artists in the entire history of art. If he was making paintings today, people probably wouldn't think anything about it, but the paintings that he lived about 500 years ago and was making the strangest, weirdest paintings of all time. He made portraits of people using fruits and vegetables, leaves and rocks and flowers. He created a whole genre in and of itself. He is often seen as one of the first surrealist painters. And again, about 400 years before surrealism began, he was creating these very strange, fantastical images. And so tomorrow also happens to be World Vegetarian Day. My wife and I are vegetarians, so I thought, like, what is something that reminds me of vegetables and fruit? Maybe Arcimboldo. So tomorrow afternoon, I'm not exactly sure what time I might start. Might be 3 o'clock, might be 5 o'clock, might be 4 o'clock Pacific time. I don't know. So if you're watching me and you're seeing me for the first time, hit that notification bell as well as the subscribe button so that when I go live and you're in YouTube, you'll be like, oh, it'll come up right on the top of the screen. Michael's live right now. And you go, oh, okay, good. I can go there. And that way I don't have to search around trying to find it. It's right there. If you enjoyed today's episode, you want to support it, please consider giving a donation via PayPal. There's a link to the PayPal below. You could send a check or e-transfer. Contact me through the Facebook group or through my email, which is on my website. Again, those links are in the description below. Thank you, everyone, for painting along with me. Once again, we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening or morning, wherever on our beautiful planet you might happen to be. Thank you, and we'll see you then, everybody. Good night.